Hello, good evening and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for all the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to a new initiative, Conquer Mains, a quality enrichment program for the upcoming civil services mains examination 2024. This is the first session where I'll be taking up 5 very important topics from the subject of Indian economy, specifically targeting the current affairs. But before that, let me walk you through certain very important features or the USPs of the Conquer Mains 2024 initiative. Starting today, for the next 60 days, this will be an intensive program curated to help you crack or ace the upcoming mains examination. Every day, 10 p.m. to 11:30 p.m., subject-specific expert faculties would be taking the classes wherein we are going to cover a total of more than 300 topics, both current affairs as well as the connected static portion of different subjects from GS Paper 1, GS Paper 2 and GS Paper 3. Put together, totally the coverage of more than 90 hours will be provided. And not just this, during the coverage, whatever topics are being discussed, detailed notes of these particular topics will be provided to you. And these notes will help you in easy revision as well as quick revision before the mains examination. Out of all the topics that are covered in the class, for one topic, the question and the model answer will be discussed in the same class. And for remaining topics, we will be conducting a weekly test that will be held on Sunday. The papers that is containing your answers will be evaluated and the right feedback will be provided to you. Using this, you can assess the level of your preparation. These are the very important features of the Conquer Mains 2024. Now, regarding the classes, many of the students demanded that we should have certain number of classes provided on the YouTube channel. We have heard you. Starting today, that is 1st July 2024, I'll be taking Indian economy. Tomorrow, 2nd July, Mukesh Jha sir will be taking certain topics from geography. After that, Himabindu ma'am will be taking S&T. After that, Abhishek sir on 4th of July will be discussing certain important aspects of modern Indian history, which carries a lot of weightage in the GS papers. On the 5th of July, Sarmad sir will be taking polity session, and on the 6th of July, Chetan sir will be taking international relations. All these 6 sessions, that is including today's session, will be done on YouTube channel. All you need to do is hit the like button, hit the subscription button, so that whenever the videos will be there on the YouTube, you will be given the intimation. So with this particular caveat, let me start the discussion. The 5 topics that I've taken to be discussed in today's session are: 1. The cracks in the fiscal federalism. What are the issues? Why there is a discussion regarding fiscal federalism? What are the important economic aspects related to the current affairs? Let's have a look at it. 2nd, there is a need to revamp the Indian statistical system. Why? What are the concerns which have been raised in recent times? Is there any way forward for this? Etc. We'll have a look at it. After that, today we are going to complete 7 years of GST. With the completion of 7 years, has the GST finally become a good and simple tax, or there is a need for reforms within the GST? If so, what kind of issues are there and what would be the reforms? We'll have a look at it. 4th topic, is WTO still relevant? There is a lot of discussion that WTO is a dead organization, or else there is also one section of economists who basically argue that the WTO, just like United Nations, has become more and more irrelevant now. Why are they discussing that? Let's have a look at it. And finally, the 5th topic, basically on the current affairs. Should we change the number of working hours to 70 hours a week? There is a lot of debate that has happened in the recent past. let's do a critical evaluation. Should we do that? Or there is need of focusing on something else rather than increasing the number of hours? This is the fifth topic. So these are the 5 very important topics, all of them very much relevant for the UPSC mains examination. Let's start with the first topic, the cracks in the fiscal federalism. Under the Constitution of India, there is a 7th schedule, and in the 7th schedule, there is a division of powers between the center as well as the states. You would have come across the concept of a union list, state list, concurrent list, etc. And under these particular distribution of powers, a very important area is distribution of financial powers. This is basically talking about the idea of a fiscal federalism. How has the Constitution of India divided the financial powers between the center as well as the states? But in recent times, there have been many concerns raised, many issues discussed in the current affairs, which is basically showing that there is a crack in the model of a fiscal federalism. There are certain frictions between the center as well as the states, which is leading to these particular cracks. What are these areas? Let's have a detailed discussion regarding these areas. The first issue is the tax devolution. Second one is the issue regarding cesses and surcharges. Third one is Article 93 and the issue related to that of net borrowing ceiling, rebranding of schemes, centrally sponsored scheme, and finally the issue of GST compensation, which we will take up under the third topic, that is the GST completing 7 years today. Now, what is the issue of tax devolution? I'm pretty sure all of you know this. The government of India, under the Article 280 of Indian Constitution, appoints Finance Commission. And the Finance Commission will provide formulas apart from various other recommendations. The most important recommendation of a Finance Commission is that it will give a formula for vertical devolution as well as horizontal devolution, using which the tax proceeds are distributed between the center and the states and thereafter amongst the states. Using the vertical devolution, the tax proceeds, again the term technically used is the central divisible pool. The divisible pool is divided between the center and the states, and using the horizontal devolution formula, the tax proceeds which are allocated to the states now are distributed amongst the states. Now, why is it there in the current affairs? There are certain states such as the southern states or the states from southern part of India which have raised concern regarding the amount of tax devolution that they are receiving. Their argument is in terms of contribution. In terms of contribution, let's say income taxes or in the form of corporate taxes to government, their contribution is much higher. In terms of GDP, their contribution is much higher. In terms of growth and development, their contribution is much higher. But when it comes to the devolution of taxes, they are not given their due. They are being ignored. They argue that the central government has a stepmotherly treatment meted out, provided to them. And that is the reason why one of the states in the southern part of India launched an initiative by the name of My Tax, My Right. Many of the chief ministers from states of India went to Delhi, protested against the policies of the government of India. So that is one very important concern that has been raised regarding the tax devolution. Second part, within the tax devolution itself, many of the experts have raised a concern saying that the amount of taxes which are collected by the government have increased by much larger percentage, has grown by a very faster pace compared to the amount of taxes that are actually devolved to the states. Just to prove the point, please have a look at the data given here. Between 2015 and 2015-16, 23-24, that is fiscal 16 and fiscal 24, the amount of tax receipts which are collected, the gross tax receipts which are collected by the center has increased from 14.6 lakh crore rupees to 33.6 lakh crore rupees. that is approximately increased by more than 1.5 times. Or you can simply say it has increased by a huge amount of percentage. But if you look at how much is the state's share out of the taxes that are actually devolved, I'm using the term out of the taxes that are actually devolved for a very simple reason. Out of the total taxes collected or the gross taxes collected, center doesn't devolve, center doesn't distribute cesses and surcharges. Center will exclude many other expenditures, tax collection expenditures, etc. And whatever is left out after that, that is basically the taxes or the divisible pool that is divided between the center as well as the states. So the share of the states out of the taxes which are distributed by the center, it has increased basically from 5.1 lakh crore rupees to 10.2 lakh crore rupees, which essentially means, again many of you will ask me, so should we remember all of this particular data? If it is possible, please do try to remember it. If it is not possible, at least try to remember in terms of percentages. You will realize that the rise in the amount of taxes collected by the center, the rise, it is much faster there compared to the rise in the amount of taxes that are devolved to the states. So the two issues which have been raised here are very simple. One, the states from southern part of India are saying we are not getting the right amount of taxes. And if you ask me, sir, why is that happening? Why the states are opposing this devolution, etc. One of the reasons predominantly contributing to this is the population. The earlier finance commissions, for example, the 14th Finance Commission, 13th Finance Commission, they used to consider different population altogether when they used to provide the formulas. Whereas the 15th Finance Commission considered the 2011 population. The 16th Finance Commission is also expected to do the same thing. So there are concerns because of this population in the southern part of India, the states these which are present in the southern part of India, they have a smaller population compared to other states in India. So they are concerned, and that is reflected in the tax devolution. So one issue is the tax devolution under Finance Commission, and the second issue is the overall devolution that is happening to the states. It is increasing at a slower pace compared to the overall taxes collected by the center. A second issue which many of the states have raised and have opposed the central's policies is regarding the cesses and surcharges. Why so? Whenever you talk about the divisible pool of taxes, that is the taxes that are divided between the center as well as the states, based on the Finance Commission recommendation, we do not include cesses and surcharges. And over a period of time, this is a contention. Over a period of time, the central government has started or increased the practice of collecting more and more tax receipts by imposing cesses and surcharges rather than simply increasing the tax rate. The whole argument is, if the center simply increases the tax rate, that will become part of divisible pool and part of it will go to the states. But rather than increasing the tax rate, what if the center simply imposes cesses, collects cesses? There is no compulsion, there is no mandate under the constitution which will force the center to distribute these particular proceeds of cesses and surcharges. And have a look at the data given here. The cesses and surcharges accounted for 5.9% of the gross tax collections in 15 and 16. It has increased to 10.8% in the financial year 23 and 24. In terms of absolute number, you can also see the amount of the taxes which are collected by the center in the form of cesses has increased by leaps and bounds, and none of it actually goes to the center. So this is the second concern. Third concern, Article 293 and net borrowing ceiling limit. What is the issue all about? Very recently, the state government of Kerala dragged the central government to Supreme Court of India, and this particular issue is taking place in the current affairs. What is the issues all about? The issue started with the concept of Article 293 and the policy of central government, using which, or the measure of the central government using which They are restricting how much is the borrowings that are done by the state government. Under Article 293, it simply states that if a state government has an outstanding loan from the center, it needs to repay this particular loan. In such cases, the state, before borrowing from any other source, should take the permission of the central government, should take the approval of the union government. That is Article 293. And using this, along with the recommendation or the observation of the 15th Finance Commission, please remember, along with the observation or the recommendation of 15th Finance Commission, central government has introduced the concept of a net borrowing ceiling. What is this net borrowing ceiling? Under the net borrowing ceiling, if a state government entity is practicing or is involved in off-budget borrowing, if it is involved in off-budget borrowing or off-budget liabilities, such liabilities will be counted as a part of the state borrowings, and this will reduce the amount of borrowings that the state is allowed to do in that specific financial year. Just to give you more clarity, let's say there is a state A and the government of this particular state wants to borrow. According to the FRBM document, it is allowed to borrow, let's say, 3,000 crore rupees from the market today. But Government of India says the state government of A also has certain agencies, certain institutions which have been practicing, let's say, off-budget borrowing in this year, and under that they have already borrowed, let's say, 1,000 crore rupees. Now Government of India says, because there is a off-budget borrowing done by the agencies here, the state government A will not be allowed to borrow 3,000 crore rupees, rather it will be allowed to borrow only 2,000 crore rupees. This is basically the concept of net borrowing ceiling that has been implemented by the central government on the states. What is the problem with this? Many of the states are arguing. For example, the state government of Kerala says there is off-budget borrowing. There is an entity by the name of KIIFB which is involved in off-budget borrowing. But that borrowing was done for implementation of infrastructure projects. So we have borrowed, but not a wasteful expenditure. It has been done for development of infrastructure projects. And because there is off-budget borrowing, now the state government, there is a restriction on the state government to borrow from the market. And because there is a restriction now, it is allowed to borrow lesser amount of money from the market, the state government's welfare measures would be affected. The state government's expenses on various other programs would be affected. Now, before going forward, many of you will have this kind of a doubt. Sir, you are discussing so many aspects of the relations between the center as well as the states, specifically targeting economics or financial matters. How do I read all of it? From where do I read all of it? There is so much to read. I do not get all of this in the books, etc. All you need to do is, there is a link provided in the description of the video. Click on the link, you will be taken to a page, and in that particular page, the PPT that I am using, as well as the detailed notes of all the 5 topics that I am covering today will be provided. So all you need to do is click, download, read. Now, this is one more issue. Next issue, centrally sponsored schemes. Why states are worried about centrally sponsored schemes? Understand, by nature, centrally sponsored schemes are decided by the central government. Center will decide which scheme to be implemented. Center will decide how much money to be spent. Center will allocate certain amount of money to be spent under the scheme. The concern of the states is that because these are sponsored schemes, by nature, part of the expenditure will have to be borne by the state governments. Let's say a scheme is being implemented, if the expenditure ratio is 60:40, in such cases, 60% of the expenditure is done by the center, 40% of expenditure has to be borne by me. And this particular 40% expenditure I will have to incur, whether I like the scheme or not, whether I need this scheme or not. irrespective of this, the money has to be spent. And the states are basically saying, when the schemes are designed, we are not consulted. When the center decides what scheme to be implemented, what should be the ratio, our viewpoints or interests are not considered. But my expenditure will be affected because of these centrally sponsored schemes. Now have a look at this. Because of such schemes, no doubt Government of India has allocated funds for these. Look at the data. Between 15 and 16, financial year 16 to financial year 24, the allocation of funds under these schemes has increased from 2 lakh crore rupees to 4.76 lakh crore rupees. Out of this, central government has allocated around 3.6 lakh crore rupees, which also means state governments have to incur the remaining expenditure. If the states are rich enough, if the states have sufficient resources to take care of this expenditure, they will do it. But what about the states which have weaker financial capacity right now? The states, in order to incur the expenditure, will be forced to borrow from the market. If they are borrowing from the market, the liabilities of the state will increase. Interest burden for the states will start increasing. And this will basically further increase the inequalities that are present already among the states. During the same time, the financial transfers were to the extent of 3.6 lakh crore rupees. So this is one more very important issue which has basically caused a lot of frictions between the center as well as the state. One more issue has been the issue of grants. The Finance Commission covers certain types of grants. Various experts looking at the data of transfers done by the center to the states under this column of the grants itself have stated that the grant in aid to the states which are provided by the center to the states have actually declined over a period of time. From 1.95 lakh crore rupees in 2015 and 16, the grants which are provided to the states has actually declined to 1.65 lakh crore rupees by the financial year 2024. So these are certain very important frictional points, or the points of friction between the center as well as the states. Now one more, which has cropped up very recently, the issue of rebranding of schemes. What do you mean by rebranding of the schemes? I've given you certain examples. Take one out of it. Central government has a scheme by the name of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, PMAY dot or dash G, Gramin. There is a Gramin component, right? So under this, the central government will allocate the funds. The states will utilize the funds. But when the states will implement, these particular schemes, state governments have the habit of changing the name of the schemes. In this example, have a look at this. Andhra Pradesh government, the previous government, changed the name of the scheme from PMAY G to PMAY YSR. Central government looked at this and stated that if you want my assistance to implement this particular scheme, then do not follow rebranding. Do not rename the scheme. Name it as it is being implemented by the center. Only and only then the funds would be provided to you. Is it the only example in the recent past? Absolutely no. In case of the state government of West Bengal, there was the same issue found. Central government stopped flow of the funds for the state government of West Bengal. Even in the state of Kerala, they also found that certain schemes have been rebranded. Center said, no, related to these particular schemes, fund flows will be stopped. And as a result of the stoppage of the funds, again there was a criticism by the state governments regarding the policies of the central government. So this is one more point of friction, financial point of friction between the center as well as the states. So all these are the areas which has actually led to the cracks in the financial federalism in India. Just to put everything in a nutshell, please remember this. The first one is the issue of tax devolution. Issue of tax devolution, that is the first very important point. Second one was the issues of cesses and surcharges. Third one was basically the grants which have been reduced by the center over a period of time. The issues right related to rebranding of the schemes. Rebranding of the schemes. There is one more issue. I'll discuss that later. The issue of GST compensation. Just give me some time. I'll discuss that as well. So these are certain very important areas which have actually led to frictions between the center as well as the states. In fact, in some of the areas, the state has actually dragged the center or the union to the Supreme Court of India. So be very, very careful. All of these are part of current affairs. UPSC might raise a question in these areas. Now let me go to the second topic. Do we need to have a revamping of Indian statistical system? It's a high time, in fact. Many of the experts very recently also have stated that there is a need to revamp Indian statistical system. And when I say Indian statistical system, I'm not expecting all the entities to be shut down and new entities to be set up. Absolutely no. There is a need to change how we measure the macroeconomic parameters. In what way we collect the data, how often we publish this particular data, etc., etc. This particular issue is so important that one of the major political parties, in fact, promised, if they were brought to power, they promised that they would look into and revamp certain parts of Indian statistical system. It was actually published as a promise in an election manifesto. So this is a basic context, and not just only this. In recent times, many experts have raised concerns regarding how we are measuring GDP in India. Are we overvaluing the GDP? Is there a wrong in terms of estimations of GDP? Many experts have raised concern regarding the measurement of CPI as well as a WPI. Many experts have raised alarm over how the data is actually collected in one of the surveys, etc. So in a nutshell, what we'll be discussing is, we'll be covering different macroeconomic parameters, important ones, and what are the issues which have been raised by various experts in all of these particular measurements of these macroeconomic parameters, and finally, what is the way forward then? What should be the recommendation? If at all a question is asked, what should you recommend to resolve this particular issue? We'll discuss that as well. So the issues that we will discuss in this particular topic is the GDP related concerns, the IIP related concerns, CPI, WPI related concerns, PLFS concerns. Most of you must have come across the term PLFS or the idea or the concept of PLFS, and without realizing that there is a problem related to PLFS, you would have simply gone through the topic. Today you will understand the concern regarding the PLFS and finally other issues as well. Now let me start with the first one, gross domestic product, GDP. What are the concerns regarding the GDP measurement in India? First one, please make a note of this. In case of GDP, CPI, WPI, IIP, etc., write a very common point, common across all of them. We need to change the base year. Please write this particular point. Remember this particular point. Make a note of this. We need to change the base year. Why? Convention. I hope you understand. Convention is that once every 5 years, we need to change the base year. But the base year for majority of these indicators, even today, is 2011 and 12. In case of one of these indicators, CPI, the base year is 2012. And we are discussing the base year concept now, sitting in the year 2024. So I hope you understand this. Convention is that we need to keep on changing the base year so that whatever data we collect, whatever indices we publish, it is very close by, it is very much related to what is happening in the current situation. But the base year is very, very old for a lot of these indicators. So remember, make a note of this. Point number one, we need to change the base year. For example, if you talk about GDP growth rate, very often in the newspapers you will come across GDP growth rate of 7.8%, 8%, etc. The GDP growth rate is calculated based on the base year of 2011 and 12. We changed the base year from 2004, 5 to 2011 and 12 in the year 2015. And based on that, in the previous year, there was a question asked by UPSC in the mains examination, by the way. The question was straightforward. Discuss the methodology that was used by Government of India to calculate GDP from 2015. I'm paraphrasing the statement, by the way. So question has already been asked. But anyways, you please make a note of this. You need to change the base year. That is fixed. Point number 2. There have been certain issues which have been raised regarding the expenditure method. Now, what is this expenditure method? In the context of GDP, I'm pretty sure all of you know this. GDP is measured or calculated under 3 methods. One is the expenditure method, second one is the production or value addition method, and the third one is income method. Out of all the 3, generally what authorities do in case of India, what the MOSPI or NSO does is, it will calculate GDP using expenditure method, it will calculate GDP using value addition method. And because there will be certain differences, because I hope you understand, in terms of data collection, there will be certain differences. So because there is a difference between how much is the GDP value under expenditure method and how much is the GDP value under the value addition method, we make both of them one and the same by introducing a component called as a discrepancy. I repeat, by introducing a component called as a discrepancy under the expenditure method. Again, all of these you will be able to see if you look at the detailed report published by MOSPI whenever quarterly GDP data is published. So various experts are saying in recent times the discrepancy component is very, very high. It is growing at a very faster pace. Why is it growing at a very faster pace? The answer to that, many experts say, it could be because lot of these data which are collected, these are extrapolated. These are simply blown up to get certain outcome under the expenditure method. So that is a concern which has been raised regarding the expenditure method. Third concern regarding GDP is the data collected under MCA 21. Ministry of Corporate Affairs 21. Lakhs of companies are identified under MCA 21 database. Various experts have pointed out the fact that many of these companies which are there in the MCA 21 database, these are not traceable. There is no trace of these particular companies. They are not able to trace these companies. And if you are not able to trace these companies, don't you think whatever GDP you calculate using MCA 21 database, there will be quality concerns regarding that? So these are the 3 very important current affairs related issues regarding the GDP calculation methodology in India. Regarding CPI and WPI, what issues have been raised? One, as usual, write the term base year. Base year for the calculation of CPI and WPI are 2012, 2011 and 12 respectively. And 2024, we are using a base year of 2012 and 2011 and 12, very, very old base year. Now, many of you will be worried, sir, why? Why did we not change the base year? What is the logic behind it? Why did we not change the base year for so many years? Please understand, whenever the base year needs to be changed, generally you need to conduct certain surveys. For example, there is a very famous survey now, Household Consumption Expenditure Survey, HCES, Household Consumption Expenditure Survey. The Household Consumption Expenditure Survey, the earlier version, the survey was conducted, data was collected, Government of India basically dumped the data. They did not publish the data. Government of India stated that there are certain quality concerns regarding the collection of the data. Hence, the previous survey that was done before the pandemic, that particular data or that particular survey was shelved by the Government of India. And after that, very recently, Government of India again has conducted Household Consumption Expenditure Survey. Data is there now, and government now needs to look at this particular data, and based on that, one, we need to change the base year for many of these macroeconomic indicators, and second one, we also need to change the composition, the basket of these indicators. For example, CPI and WPI. When you look at the HCES data, the consumption expenditure survey data, you realize that the amount of money that is being spent by the households on the food has increased, and the basket that is used for CPI and WPI, it's a very old basket. The weightage for food is different under both of these baskets. We need to change the basket according to the latest data, which represents how much of my total expenditure I do on food as well as non-food items. So composition of the basket needs to be changed. We are expecting that to happen very soon by the government now. Second year, the base year also needs to be changed. This is regarding CPI and WPI. What about PLFS? Periodic Labor Force Survey. Why should we make certain changes in the PLFS now? Listen to me very carefully. Before the PLFS was introduced, we had Employment Unemployment Survey. EUS, Employment Unemployment Survey. The issue with Employment Unemployment Survey was that it was conducted once every 5 years. It was conducted, I repeat, once every 5 years. So we felt the data needs to be very fresh or recent data based on which we need to make certain policies in employment. That's the reason we stopped conducting EUS and we shifted to a new methodology called as PLFS, Periodic Labor Force Survey, which is conducted by NSSO. And under the Periodic Labor Force Survey, we estimate unemployment rate in urban India as well as rural India. But the problem is that in case of urban India, we estimate unemployment for every quarter, that is once every 3 months. And for rural part of India, the unemployment rate is published annually, that is once a year. But look at the problem here. If you are the government, now you know that there is a problem of unemployment rate in a rural part of India. And one of the reasons, again, don't make it political, but anyways, one of the reasons of the election outcomes, the recently conducted Lok Sabha election outcomes is said to be unemployment rate in a rural part of India. So government of India wants to make certain policies, wants to address the issue of unemployment in a rural part of India. But the unemployment rate is published annually under PLFS for rural part of India. And for urban part of India, it is published once every 3 months. So that's the reason various experts have pointed this out and they have stated that, in fact, even government of India very recently has stated that they want to change the frequency. They want to make this particular indicator a high frequency indicator where publication is done much more frequently. Rather than, let's say, once in a year, we will publish it much more times or many more times in a year. So regarding PLFS, we need to make this particular change. IIP. What is the issue regarding IIP? Index of Industrial Production. Understand this very carefully. On one side we have GDP and on the other side we have IIP. GDP focuses on value addition. It focuses on value addition to the economy. Whereas IIP majorly focuses on volume changes in the economy. And traditionally, there is a very close linkage between the change in the IIP as well as changes in the GDP. That is, if the IIP keeps on changing, keeps on increasing, we also see GDP also keeps on changing or increasing somewhere in the same range of IIP growth rate. But of late what has been seen is there's a huge divergence, there's a huge gap between the rate of growth in the IIP as well as the rate of growth in the GDP. Just to prove my point, have a look at this. In the last 10 years, the GDP has grown by more than 5.5%. And by the way, when I say GDP here, it is a real GDP. Real GDP, the real GDP has changed, that is at a compounded annual growth rate of more than 5.5%, whereas IIP has changed somewhere in the range of 3.5%. So there is a rising divergence, the gap between the IIP growth rate as well as the GDP growth rate, it is very high. It is not traditionally observed in this particular these two parameters as such. So that is the reason various experts are calling for changing of IIP or changing the methodology of IIP. Their argument is IIP is a very, very old indicator. The IIP for the first time was published in the year 1950. Right? The discussion goes back to 1950s. And the base year that we chose was 1937. So it's a very, very old indicator. We need to revamp this indicator, restructure this indicator, so that the divergence that is existing is explained, the divergence is reduced, etc. Right? So these are certain issues regarding index of industrial production. What are the other issues in statistical system? The other issues are, one, we need to have timely publication of data. What is the issue of timely publication here? In the recent past, it has been observed that Government of India will shell certain surveys, will basically not publish the data of certain surveys, and will go ahead and will publish certain surveys or the data of these particular surveys. The argument of various experts is, if you want to increase the credibility of the statistical system in India, if you want to increase the credibility, stop, right, all of this. Give more autonomy to National Statistical Commission. In fact, NSE in its annual report of 2017, I repeat, NSE in its annual report of 2017 has argued for the same. If we want to increase the credibility of the data that is published by the agencies in India, what we need to do is give more autonomy, give more powers to the agencies which are publishing, rather than having more and more interference in their functioning. So timely publication of the data is required. Whether the data paints a government policies in the good picture or the bad picture doesn't matter. Data is data. Right? So that is the reason we need to have timely publication of data. Second one, there are certain concerns which have been raised regarding field data collection. Just to put in a context, there is one census called as economic census. I repeat, there is a census which has been started by the government called as economic census. Under the economic census, the field data should be collected. That is, certain amount of data going to the field, the data must be collected. And in the process of collecting the data, it has been found that certain agencies, certain entities which do not have any kind of experience, I repeat, these entities which do not have any kind of experience in the data collection have been chosen, and the order or the tender has been allocated to them. And as a result of this, many experts have raised quality concerns regarding the data collected by the entity. And this is not just the issue regarding the quality of the data, it is also about usage of public resources. Because when you hire an entity like this, you end up paying money. And if you do not use the data and you shell that particular survey, you cancel that particular finding, then it is not using the public resources efficiently, it is inefficient utilization. So that also is one of the very important concerns regarding the data collection or the statistical system in India. So all these are the important areas. Now many of you might be thinking, sir, you are discussing so many important concepts or so many, let's say, facets of the statistical system. Why should we read all of it? What is the importance of this for the civil services examination? My dear, very recently, there is a discussion that if the government of India needs to make efficient policies, if the government of India needs to make effective policies, there is a need to have right collection of data. There is a need to have indicators being published much more frequently. There is a need to measure the right entities. There is a need to evaluate the methodology that is used to collect the data. That is the reason there is a lot of discussion regarding revamping or restructuring how the statistical system in India actually functions. Now based on this, right, what is the way forward? What should we do now? First one, use the data from recent surveys. What is the use of it? Use the data from recent surveys to make policies. to restructure the baskets of, let's say, CPI and WPI, to change the base year for many of these indicators. Frequency of the indicator publication must be increased. For example, I talked about PLFS. We need to increase the frequency with which we publish PLFS. Set up high-powered committee. In fact, this one has already been done by the government. This is the most recent current affairs. On 27th June, please make a note of this. On 27th June, in the Gazette, Government of India Gazette, the government has announced establishment of 26-member committee. Please make a note of this. The recommendations of the committee will be done to revamp, to basically change the base year for GDP, to restructure many indicators, etc. So this already has been done by the government. This is the most recent current affairs. Please be very, very careful. Done. So based on this, I have given a question here. There is a need for reliable and timely statistics, as these are the pillars based on which the policies are formulated, implemented and evaluated. In the light of the above statement, discuss the recent issues raised regarding Indian statistical system. 250 words, 15 marker. Model answer is very simple. You can start with the introduction here. Keep it very simple, straightforward. You can simply say that we need to have a data collection methodology, or we need to collect the data in much more reliant manner. We need to have efficient data collection using which policies can be formulated by the government and evaluated by the government. Now come to the main body. However, in recent times, there have been many concerns raised regarding the statistical system in India. First one, the base year needs to change. I'm basically putting everything into context now. Rather than discussing GDP individually, IIP individually, I'm putting all of them into, let's say, 250 words now. So one, the base year needs to change. There itself we can give examples of GDP, CPI, WPI. Second one, the way the data is collected needs to be relooked at. You need to revamp this data collection. For example, you can quote the data of, let's say, the economic census data. You can quote example of GDP, right? Let's say the GDP data. We need to have a relook how the data is actually collected. Third one, we also need to ensure that the basket which is used, right? The basket is also revamped. Right, so these are some of the pointers that you can mention, saying that these are the issues of Indian statistical system. We have discussed individually. Put all of them in a nutshell. And finally, you can come to a recommendation or way forward. You can say that the government of India needs to increase the frequency of these indicators. Second, you can simply say that government of India also has set up a 26-member panel. MOSP has announced the establishment of this panel, which will look at revamping, or let's say changing the base year for the GDP in the coming years. So this is how you model the answer to this kind of a question. Done. So this is the second topic. Let me go to the third topic now. GST, need to make it good and simple tax. What is the context? Even though so many years have passed with implementation of GST, why are we discussing GST even today? Understand this, goods and services tax is a very important indirect tax reform. After the 1991 LPG reforms, the GST is considered to be one of the biggest reforms implemented by the government. And this particular GST as a model was brought into force from 1st July 2017. It was implemented from 1st July 2017. And under the model of GST, what did we expect? So that you understand the difference between what was expected and what has been achieved. And there itself lies the answer to the question. What was expected with the implementation of GST? We expected that it will ease the doing business in India. It will make it easier to conduct business in India. Why, you will understand in a minute. It will be becoming one nation and one indirect tax. One nation, one tax. it will basically help us in restructuring, revamping the indirect taxation, wherein we had different indirect taxes being imposed and collected by the center, different indirect taxes imposed and collected by the states. And not just different indirect taxes, please understand the indirect taxes. And before I go forward, instead of saying every time indirect taxes, I'll simply say taxes. Under the ambit of GST, I'll simply use the term taxes. You understand it is indirect taxes. Okay, now let's start. The complexity, the problem was that earlier from one state to another state, the tax name will be same, but the rate of taxation was different. For example, imagine you want to purchase this particular marker in one state. The state government would have a sales tax of, or let's say VAT of 14%. Another state would have a VAT of 15%. Third state would have a VAT of, or sales tax of, let's say 10%. So the system was very complicated. It was very complicated. And not just that, there is also a cascading effect. There is an issue of cascading effect, wherein the tax which is already existing in the system, that is within the price of the product, on the tax, one more tax was being implemented. So cascading effect actually led to shadow of one tax falling over the other tax, market prices shot up, and ultimately the tax burden on the customer or the consumer became very, very high. So these were some of the concerns. To address these particular concerns, government, that is the government of India along with the state governments, agreed to implement the model of goods and services tax starting from 1st July 2017. What has been the achievement then? Has GST worked in favor of India? What has been the outcomes of implementation of GST? Point number one. With implementation of GST, no doubt, the average taxes collected, the average taxes which are collected have increased. Let me show certain data to you. Please have a look at this. Do not memorize this graph, not related or not important. Please focus on the data. What you'll see is starting from 2017 and 2018, if you keep looking more rightwards, you will realize that the amount of GST collected has kept on increasing. Again, don't worry about 20 and 21 because it was a pandemic year. But after the pandemic has passed away, you will see that the amount of taxes collected again have increased. And the average monthly GST collection as well. If you look at the year 2017 and 2018, the average monthly collection was 0.9 trillion rupees. And as per the latest data for 24 and 25, if you look at this, the average monthly collection of GST is 1.9 lakh crore rupees. 1.9 lakh crore rupees. Right? So amount of the GST receipts which are collected average monthly, it has increased, no doubt. What about the tax receipts collected under GST? It has increased, right? That is also in favor of implementation of GST. What about the tax buoyancy? What about the tax buoyancy? Because please understand this, many of the experts will basically argue this. Do not just look at how much is the GST collection. Do not always look at how much is the tax collection. Why? A better way to compare whether the reform is working well or not is to compare the amount of taxes collected with the GDP of a country. Compare that with the GDP. Because with the change in the GDP, the amount of taxes collected should also change. That is the reason tax to GDP ratio is a better indicator. That will give you a better indicator. So have a look at the tax to GDP indicator. GST collections as a percentage of GDP. The GST collections mentioned as a percentage of GDP, you will see that it is 6.23 in the year 2018 and 2019 and 6.83 for the year 23 and 24, which also basically means what? The amount of taxes that we have collected in the form of GST have kept on increasing as the GDP has kept on changing. So that's a good indicator. What about tax buoyancy? If you look at the tax buoyancy, which basically measures changes in the taxes divided by changes in the GDP. that is the percentage change in the taxes collected divided by percentage change in the GDP. The economic survey, last year's economic survey mentions that before the implementation of GST, the tax buoyancy was somewhere around 0.9. And these particular taxes which have been brought under the ambit of GST now, which have been subsumed under GST, the tax buoyancy for these particular taxes now is more than 1. Which basically means compared to the growth rate in the GDP, the tax receipt collection of these taxes which have been subsumed under GST, they have been growing at a much faster pace, which is also a good indicator. The tax base, I repeat, the tax base for the government has widened. More number of taxpayers are present under the ambit of GST now. All these are the benefits. I hope you understand all of this. All these are the benefits that we have been able to accrue with the implementation of goods and services tax from 1st July 2017. Having said so, what are the concerns? Has the GST actually become good and simple tax as it was envisaged, as it was pitched by the government of India before its implementation? Even today, many experts point out certain issues that are plaguing GST. And because these issues are plaguing GST, automatically the taxpayers or the companies which are covered under GST, they are facing burden. They are facing certain concerns. What are these? Let's go one by one. First one is the issue of rationalization. GST rationalization. When the GST was introduced, even today for that matter, Government of India says the central theme is one nation, one tax, one market. I repeat, the central theme government says is one nation, one tax, one market. One nation, one tax means all the indirect taxes will be brought under the ambit of GST. We will have only one tax. And one market essentially means if I am a manufacturer, whether I am manufacturing in the state A, B, C, D, doesn't matter. When I sell the product, I will pay only one rate. I don't have to be worried. I'll pay only one tax. One tax, not one rate. One tax. I don't have to be worried about different taxes from different governments. That is one market. That is the central theme of GST. But many experts argue that under GST itself, Government of India has implemented, or the GST Council has implemented multiple slabs or multiple rates. The most important rates are 0%, 5%, 12%, 18% and 28%. These are the most important rates. Apart from this, multiple rates are also there. But these are the most important rates. Government of India argues that the reason these rates or this structure was followed was precisely because consumer groups are different in India. All the consumers are not the same in India. Their consumption patterns are not the same in India. There are consumers which belong to middle class households. There are consumers who belong to very, very poor class or very poor households. There are consumers who belong to ultra rich class of the society. I will borrow the statement that was used by the Prime Minister as well as the then Finance Minister on the floor of the Parliament. In a country such as India, you cannot have the same tax rate on an Audi car as well as a Hawaii chappal. I'll repeat the statement. In a country such as India, we cannot have the same tax rate on an Audi car as well as a Hawaii chappal, because the consumption or the consumers of both of these products is done by completely two different sets of the society. The people who have sufficient amount of money to shell out and purchase an Audi car should be asked to pay more amount of taxes, and that is correct, by the way. That is fair. In fact, it is one of the canons of taxation. Based on the capacity to pay taxes, pay more taxes. That is the reason Government of India says we will have multiple rates of GST. Multiple rates or multiple slabs of GST. In fact, another argument is that if I have only one rate, let's say rather than having so many slabs, I will have only one slab, only one rate, 10%. what if I end up losing certain amount of tax receipts? In that case, many of you will simply say, sir, let them not have 10%, let them increase it to a single rate of, let's say, 18% or 15%. All the goods and services under GST will be imposed with 18% or 15% tax rate. That is again a problem. That will increase the market prices of these goods and services. It will become regressive on the poor people. Right? So argument is, I cannot have only one rate which is very low or which is very high. There are problems. Hence, I will basically have multiple rates of GST. These are the arguments. But having said so, please understand, more than 150 countries have implemented GST now. More than 150 countries. India is one of the very few countries, very few, countable number of countries which have multiple slabs or multiple tax rates. So there is no other way. You will have to reduce the number of rates. What is the problem with having multiple rates? There is an issue called as inverted duty. There is a problem associated with this called as inverted duty. I'll come to that, don't worry. And not just this. Because of multiple tax rates, there is a criticism. The criticism is that GST looks like old wine in a new bottle. I repeat, GST looks like old wine in a new bottle. Earlier we had different indirect taxes with different names. Today we have only one indirect tax with different rates. It looks like old wine in a new bottle. So we need to rationalize, we need to reduce the number of rates or slabs. But the concern is, how do we do that? We wanted to do it, then there was a pandemic. There was a certain interest that was shown by the government, but then there was a pandemic. Now again there is a discussion, various experts are arguing, because the amount of GST you are able to collect has increased to record highs now. You are able to collect a huge amount of GST receipts now. Utilize this time and implement rationalization, reduce the number of slabs. One of the recommendation is by NIPFP. Remember, National Institute for Public Finance and Policy, NIPFP. It has recommended that you should merge 12 and 18%, make it 15%. And because you will reduce from 18 to 15%, you will lose certain tax receipts. Increase 5% to 8%, increase 28% to 30% to compensate for those receipt losses. So this is a recommendation that has been provided. So this is one issue. We need to rationalize. No other option. We need to rationalize to make it good and simple tax. Now I used a term called as inverted duty structure. What is this inverted duty structure? If you are a manufacturer, when you purchase inputs, you pay taxes on the input. When you sell the output, you collect taxes on the output. Simply understand this. The amount of taxes, I repeat, the amount of taxes on the input, if it is higher compared to amount of taxes on the output, that is called as inverted duty structure. Is it okay? I'll repeat it. The amount of taxes that you pay as a manufacturer, that you pay on the inputs when you purchase, if it is very high compared to the amount of taxes you collect and pay to the government when you sell the output, that is called as inverted duty structure. And what is the problem? Why is there an inverted duty structure? Because we have multiple tax rates. Under GST, we have multiple tax rates, and that actually leads to inverted duty structure. For example, take plastic. Plastic can be used to manufacture a basic toy that is purchased by a middle class household. Plastic can be used to manufacture Hawaii chappals as well. Same plastic can be used to manufacture certain products in Audi car as well. So when it is consumed to manufacture or in manufacturing of an Audi car, tax rate will be very high, or it should be very high. So government will impose a higher tax GST there. But as a result of that, when it is used to manufacture, right, let's say a chappal here or a slipper here or a toy, the tax rate on input will be much higher compared to the tax rate on the output. That is basically the cause of inverted duty structure. And what is the problem if there is an inverted duty structure? Whatever is my calculation may not be acceptable to the tax authorities. this might actually lead to litigation, and that has actually happened. Tax litigation is caused because of multiple tax rates. Second, if there is an inverted duty structure, if there is a litigation, and normally also there might be a delay in providing input tax credit under GST, and that will basically ensure that I do not have sufficient amount of working capital. Because please understand, I'm a small manufacturer, I have limited amount of money. Now if government will delay providing input tax credit, certain amount of money will be stuck up, there is a shortage of working capital. Now I'll be forced to borrow from the market, and when I borrow, because I do not have sufficient working capital, I will have to pay interest on this. And when I pay interest on this, what will happen to cost of manufacturing? The cost of manufacturing will increase, and when cost of manufacturing increases, the market price will increase. This many experts say it originates because of inverted duty structure, and because the market prices are higher, my export competitiveness would be affected. Right? So all of this is actually happening. Manufacturers are losing out market share because of inverted duty structure. So this is one more issue. Exempted goods. There are various goods or services even today which are not exempted. I'll club the discussion between two concepts here. One is exempted goods, and second one is basically fuel products. Fuel products. Understand this. There are certain goods and services even today, these are exempted. There is no GST rate on this. Many experts argue we should not do that. We should bring all of these indirect taxes under the ambit of GST. Otherwise, what is the logic of having GST and parallelly a different indirect tax on certain products? There is no usage of it. We are going to defeat the whole purpose of one nation, one indirect tax. So all of these products or all of these taxes, indirect taxes mind you, should be brought under the ambit of simply one tax, GST. Now what about fuel products? Please understand, the GST Council is yet to announce GST rates on fuel products. Reason being, the states are concerned, I repeat, the states are concerned, and to a very great extent even the center is worried about it. Reason being, understand this, according to the recent data, 16 to 17% of the total earnings are done by the government of India, own receipts of government of India. Out of that, 16 to 17% is in the form of prices or taxes on fuel. Taxes on fuel. That's a huge amount of money. Okay, huge amount of money. So even government of India as well as the state governments are concerned that if they announce a GST of maximum, let's say 28% on the fuel products, on these fuel products, they would end up losing huge amount of money. And that is one of the reasons why even today, because please understand this, if the GST Council announces GST rates on fuel products, there is no requirement of a constitution. There is no requirement of amending the constitution. They can directly announce it because under the GST bill it has been covered. But because of the concern over the loss of the tax receipts, we are yet to announce a GST rate on fuel products. So as long as we do not announce it, it will not become one nation, one indirect taxation. GST compensation as well as revenue protection. When the GST was implemented, the states were concerned about their receipts, their revenues. Why? If you are the chief minister, imagine you are the chief minister of a state, you can decide what will be the indirect tax rate on this product. I hope you understand. You can decide according to your requirement. This year you might increase the tax rate, next year you might decrease the tax rate. Entirely the power is with you. But with the implementation of GST, if this product is brought under the GST, you individually cannot decide the taxation. You cannot decide the taxation. GST Council shall decide the taxation. In fact, that is one of the biggest concerns now. I'll tell you a point here. Listen to me very carefully. When we introduce the model of GST Council, we introduce this as a prime example of cooperative federalism. But despite the authority being set up for so many years, even today there are a lot of frictions in the GST Council. Among the state governments, there is a lot of differing opinion. The reason is, some of the states, the amount of taxes that they are able to collect is much higher compared to the pre-GST era. And some of the states, the amount of taxes they are able to collect today, it is lower, it is lesser for them. They expected more amount of revenue, and that has actually led to frictions or divisions within the GST Council, and that is generally seen whenever something is taken up for discussion within the GST Council. So GST compensation was provided for the period of 5 years. Now the 5-year duration is over. 1st July 2017. From this 5 years, that will basically mean end of June 2022. So 5-year duration is over. But the states are demanding continued compensation. Their argument is, the center promised or center stated that by the time compensation period would be over, GST would have stabilized. The structure of GST would have stabilized. But after the implementation, there was a pandemic. There was a whole disruption of the economy in India. And we have recovered, but if there was no pandemic, if there was no impact of the pandemic, our GDP would have been much higher today. And with the higher GDP, the states as well as the center could have collected much higher amount of GST revenue. So the argument of the states is, you announced that you will provide compensation for 5 years, but we are not happy with that. Extend the compensation for more number of years. This demand so far has not been accepted by the center. However, please understand, center has extended the application of GST compensation cess for a very simple reason. During the pandemic, center borrowed 2.69 lakh crore rupees to provide compensation to the states. To pay interest as well as the principal amount, center has continued implementing or collecting the GST compensation cess and using the cess to repay this borrowing. So this is one more very important concern that has been raised. In addition to this, there is one more issue, compliance issue. Remember that. There is one more very important issue, compliance. What do you mean by compliance here? How much is the total expenditure that you would be incurring to follow certain guidelines? What would be your expenses if you want to follow the guidelines of the government? That is basically called as a compliance. With implementation of GST, many experts have argued the compliance burden for the MSMEs specifically has gone up. And MSMEs have been hurt, have been affected very badly because of the pandemic. And so compliance is one more issue regarding the concept of goods and services tax. So what is the way forward? What needs to be done? What kind of reforms are required? One, Government of India has already set up or restructured the group of ministers on rate rationalization. In fact, the chairperson of this particular group of ministers was changed very recently. It is the new Deputy Chief Minister of the state of Bihar who has been appointed as the chairperson of this group of ministers, Mr. Chowdhury. Mr. Chowdhury has been appointed as the chairperson. Second, the GST Council is considering a proposal to provide relief to the sectors which are suffering because of inverted duty structure. That also has been taken up by the GST Council. And the third one, the Government of India made an amendment and has announced establishment of GST Appellate Tribunal. The chairperson has been appointed very recently. Across India, 31 benches of GST Appellate Tribunal will be set up to resolve the tax disputes under GST. So these are some of the, let's say, the measures which have been already taken by the government. Other measures or other recommendations you can provide based on what we have studied so far. So this is basically the third very important topic related to the goods and services tax, which is yet to become a good and simple tax. Fourth topic that I'll be discussing now is about World Trade Organization. Is a WTO relevant even today? if you are reading the newspapers in recent times, you must have come across ministerial conference. The ministerial conference was conducted, it was held, but there was no outcome, there was no agreement that was signed within the ministerial conference. So in the context of that, there has been a lot of discussion. Is the World Trade Organization effective even today? It was established back in the year 1995 with a lot of agreements agreed upon, with a lot of agreements signed by the member countries. We expected a lot of outcomes from the World Trade Organization. But in the last 1 decade, one after the other, multiple ministerial conferences have taken place. Meetings have been held, but with very little outcome. So that is the reason there is a rising opinion. There is a rising opinion or increasing opinion amongst many of these members who are saying that World Trade Organization, no doubt, it is a forum, it is an international forum, but it is losing its relevance. It is becoming an organization at international level, but without any incremental importance. So in that particular context, why? What are the issues? Why are we discussing the relevance of WTO today? First one, noodle ball phenomenon, or else this is also referred to as spaghetti phenomenon. Spaghetti phenomenon. Now what is the spaghetti phenomenon? You will understand. Rising protectionism, dispute settlement body, focus on the non-trade issues, as well as no major agreement. Under these particular 5 headings, we'll discuss what has happened to relevance of World Trade Organization in recent years. The first one is spaghetti bowl phenomenon. Spaghetti bowl phenomenon, or else many of the experts also call this as a noodle ball phenomenon. Now what is this argument, right, and why this has been discussed as a concern regarding the presence, or let's say the existence of World Trade Organization? Initially, during the Second World War, there was a conference called as a Bretton Woods Conference, and the members of Bretton Woods Conference signed an agreement which is very famously called as GATT. Over a period of time, the members held discussions, and 1995 we established World Trade Organization. One of the very important objectives of WTO, why WTO was given so much of relevance, was to basically regulate global trade. It was expected to become a forum where the member countries will come together, hold discussions, sign agreements, and the global trade would be promoted. But over a period of time, what has happened? What has happened over a period of time? The member countries, rather than all of them coming together and signing agreements, there is a rising trend where the member countries, they are signing agreements amongst each other. I hope you understand. Rather than all these member countries coming together and signing one agreement, what these member countries are doing is, amongst themselves, increasingly they are signing these agreements. These are called as regional trade agreements. RTAs have increased over a period of time. In fact, the latest data that is published in World Trade Organization's website, you will see that the number of RTAs has started ballooning in recent times. The number of RTAs, regional trade agreements, has started ballooning in recent times. And when these RTAs, that is, let's say India will sign an agreement with another country or with a group of countries such as ASEAN, which is already there by the way, right? ASEAN will sign one more trade agreement with another country. USA will sign trade agreement with India. So bilateral trade agreements, plurilateral trade agreements, these kinds of trade agreements which are signed amongst the member countries has increased by leaps and bounds. More than 350 such agreements, right, are under force now, and many more have been notified yet to be implemented. So argument of various experts is that you will see this kind of a situation where member countries of WTO are signing agreements amongst each other, which means, are they not weakening the global body? Which also means they do not have sufficient confidence about the performance of global body or this international forum, where all the member countries could have come together, signed agreements. So this is basically the importance of spaghetti ball phenomenon. Again, you do not need to memorize this particular map. What you need to understand or just infer is, if you look at the member countries of WTO, you will see that these member countries of WTO have kept on signing or have entered into agreements with multiple other member countries only. Right, so this is basically one issue which has weakened, which has reduced the relevance of World Trade Organization. Second, rising protectionism. What is the issue of protectionism here? Under the WTO, the objective, like I mentioned earlier, was to promote global trade. Now, if you want to promote global trade, you need to address the issue of tariff barriers as well as non-tariff barriers. You need to reduce and eliminate tariff barriers as well as non-tariff barriers. Has it happened? In fact, in the context of India itself, again, every member country will have their own arguments. In fact, in the context of Indian government itself, in the last couple of years, the amount of tariffs that they have implemented, it has increased. The number of items which have been covered under the tariffs in the last 1 decade has actually increased. Is it just in the context of India? Absolutely no. It has been done by many other member countries as well. Especially during pandemic, many of these member countries of WTO stated that they want to protect the domestic interest. They wanted to protect domestic inflation. They want to protect the national security, etc. Citing these kinds of reasons, have kept on implementing, increasing, right, let's say introducing more and more tariff barriers as well as non-tariff barriers. And as a result of this, the global trade has been affected. The global trade has been disrupted. In fact, in the context of India itself, I just want to give you one example here. There is a report which has been published by GTRI. There is a report which has been published by GTRI and many other organizations which have evaluated, I repeat, which have evaluated what kind of tariffs have been implemented by Government of India and what has been the impact of these particular tariffs. According to one such a survey, according to one such study, it says that because Government of India is imposing tariffs on certain electronic products, and it is being done by the Government of India. Because the Government of India is implementing tariffs on these particular products, these products are imported at a higher price. These are used to manufacture, let's say, smartphones in India. And because the imports have become costlier because of the tariff, our exports are getting affected. If these tariffs were not present, India's smartphone exports would have been much higher. Again, this is one viewpoint or one side of the argument. There is a counter argument as well. So argument here in a nutshell is, though WTO was implemented and under the WTO objective was to promote global trade, if you want to increase the global trade, you need to reduce and eliminate tariff barriers as well as non-tariff barriers. But in recent times, there has been a rising trend of protectionism, where member countries of WTO, one after the other, they have been implementing the tariff as well as non-tariff barriers. And that has reduced the importance or the relevance of World Trade Organization. Third one is a dispute settlement body, DSB, dispute settlement body. At one point of time, dispute settlement body was considered to be the crown jewel of WTO. Crown jewel. And what has happened today? The dispute settlement body is dysfunctional. Remember this. It is dysfunctional. What do you mean by dysfunctional? It is not at all operating. It is ineffective now. Why? Under the dispute settlement body, there is an entity, there is a part of it which is called as appellate body. In the appellate body, USA constantly has been vetoing appointment of the members. Out of the sanctioned strength of 7 members, today there are 0 members. There are 0 members in the appellate body. And because there are no members in the appellate body, whatever appeals are done by the member countries in the appellate body, it is basically appealing into void. It is appealing to one authority where there is nobody to listen to you. And that is the precise reason why the whole dispute settlement body has become dysfunctional. Right? So at one point of time, it was considered to be crown jewel. Today, it is not at all operating. And that is the reason the dispute settlement system also has become dysfunctional. Focus on the non-trade issues. When WTO was established, the focus was on trade issues. The focus was basically to promote global trade. And whenever the discussions used to happen in the ministerial conference as well, the focus used to be centered about how do we promote global trade? How do we make it easier to export? How do we make it easier to import? For example, earlier in the Bali conference 2013, there was an agreement. Outcome of this conference was an agreement, trade facilitation agreement. There is an agreement on agriculture. There is an agreement on subsidies and countervailing measures. All of these focus on promotion of trade. In some cases, it is agriculture. In some cases, it is about investments, again related to trade only. In some cases, it is related to goods, other goods, etc. But the center of discussions, negotiations, etc. has always been trade under WTO. But in recent times, there is a rising trend where member countries of WTO have started introducing non-trade issues under WTO. During the negotiations, during the discussions, etc., non-trade issues are being floated, and these are being accepted by many other member countries of WTO. For example, very recently, there was one proposal regarding investment facilitation that was floated by China. Around 100 member countries accepted this. Although government of India and other member country rejected it. And their argument was again the same thing. WTO should be about trade. It should focus on promotion of trade. Anything that is not related to trade will not be entertained, should not be taken up under World Trade Organization's negotiations. So there is a rising trend of introducing non-trade issues which will further weaken the performance, or let's say the operations of the World Trade Organization. No major agreement has been entered into under WTO in the last multiple ministerial conferences. Although under multiple ministerial conferences, there is a discussion. There is a discussion regarding fishery subsidies. One or the other member countries will oppose it, including India, by the way. There is a discussion regarding the food security. Again, member countries, there is no common, let's say, common ground where all the member countries can meet. There are discussions regarding multiple subjects. But the issue has been that there is so much of groupism. There are so many fractions which have been created over a period of time. The WTO, that is a ministerial conference under WTO, is not able to bring all of them on the same platform, make them agree to certain factors, or let's say certain agreements or certain proposals for that matter. And with the elections which are going to happen in the USA now, you must have observed this. In this year, elections are going to be conducted. Presidential elections are going to be conducted in USA. There is a rising concern amongst many member countries of WTO that if Mr. Donald Trump is re-elected, he might simply gut WTO. He might simply make the WTO much more ineffective. In fact, there are concerns that USA might start thinking of withdrawing itself from WTO. Again, just a thinking which will further weaken the World Trade Organization. So these are the various issues that have been raised in recent times which have been showcased as the reasons why WTO is becoming weaker and weaker over a period of time, and it might end up becoming United Nations or a version of United Nations where member countries are there, but the relevance in the global market, relevance in today's scenario is not there. And WTO might become a same kind of an organization where no marginal improvements will be observed in any of these particular situations, or let's say in any of these subjects or topics which are supposed to be discussed and decided under the auspices of World Trade Organization. So this is the fourth topic. The fifth topic, which I'm pretty sure will be very close to your heart: higher working hours is equal to higher GDP. This has come into discussion because of the argument that we should increase the number of hours, weekly number of hours, working hours by the way, to 70. Right now, please understand, according to the Factories Act, remember this, according to Factories Act, under multiple sections, this is discussed. How many working days should be there in a week? How many working hours should be there? So there are sections, section 51, 52, 54, which talk about all of this. According to the section here, in a day, a person is not allowed to work for more than 9 hours in a factory. Not more than 9 hours. And in a week put together, that will come out to be 48 hours. In a week put together, it will convert, or it will become translate into 48 hours. Now, because of the pandemic, during pandemic what happened was, many of these factories were shut down, many of the manufacturing activity was disrupted, and as a result of that, our GDP, the GDP was also affected. So the argument of many of the experts or the proponents was that we should increase the number of working hours. Rather than keeping it at 40, let's increase it. Let's make it 70. Let's increase it to more than 48 hours so that the production will increase, and whatever has been lost because of that is the GDP which has been lost because of the pandemic, will be able to get it compensated for. Will be able to address that particular lost GDP. And citing that, many states have proposed to increase the number of working hours. In fact, two states from southern part of India, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, in fact they brought in an amendment to change the number of working hours from 9 to 12 hours a day. 9 hours to 12 hours a day. Their argument was, if I increase the number of working hours from 9 to 12 hours a day, that is basically 2 shifts in one day, throughout the day, that is 24 hours, the production will happen, and this will help us increasing manufacturing output. This will make us much more competitive. It will increase the contribution to GDP. That was the argument given by the state governments. There was a lot of opposition, and as a result of this, the amendments to Factories Act which were proposed by the state government of Karnataka as well as Tamil Nadu, the amendments were dropped. Right, so this is basically the background, and in addition to this, Mr. Narayan Murthy, a very well-known expert here, Mr. Narayan Murthy, an industrialist by the way, a businessman, argued that if you want India to become a developed country, we should increase the number of working hours from 48 hours to 70 hours. We should do that. That was the argument. And there were certain experts who accepted this or who supported his viewpoint, and there were many others who criticized, who were opposed to the viewpoint. But in this, let's do a critical evaluation. We will neither go this side nor that side. Let's do a critical evaluation. If you increase, what will happen? If you keep it the same, what will happen? Let's start. What are the benefits? If you increase the number of working hours from 48 hours to let's say 70 hours, what will happen? What is expected out of this? 1. We expect the production to start increasing. We expect more and more goods to be produced. And if you are able to produce more and more goods, automatically GDP will also start increasing. So we will be able to achieve higher production, we will be able to increase the GDP growth rate, and this will help us to become one of the fastest growing countries and the largest economies over a period of time. Their argument is, we will be able to become a developed country much sooner than what we are targeting today. That is the first one. Second one, it will help India become very competitive in the global market. You want to compete with China. You want to compete with Japan. You want to compete with Germany, USA, etc. If you want to become competitive in the global market, increase the number of working hours. Throughout the day, or let's say throughout the week, lot of production will increase. The output will increase. Now you can compete with the global peers or your competitors. That is the second argument. Third one, the manufacturer or the employer, if number of working hours is increased, the manufacturer will have more flexibility in terms of hiring labor according to the requirement, rather than hiring for 4, or let's say rather hiring 5 people, 6 people based on 48 hours of output. Now flexibility will be there with the manufacturer or the employer to hire lesser people or hire the same number of people but have more output. So lot of flexibility will be there with the manufacturer or the employer with a higher number of working hours. These are some of the expected benefits if you increase the number of working hours from 48 hours to 70 hours. But having said so, are there concerns related to this? Are there any problems associated with this proposal? Yes. Let's go one by one. First one, if you increase the number of working hours, today you are working for 8 hours, then you are going home, you are taking rest, there is work-life balance. Now if you increase the number of working hours to let's say 12 hours, the number of hours that are available for you to take rest will come down. That might increase the stress on the working labor. This, in fact, many experts argue, might increase the number of people who will remain absent for work. Number of people who will quit the job, that might also start increasing. And the concern here is, if absenteeism increases, if people quitting the companies will increase, in fact, we have not increased it to 12, but post-pandemic, I'm pretty sure you have come across the big resign wave, where people, when they were asked to come back to the offices, they simply said, no, I don't want to come, I will simply resign. So forget about increasing the number of working hours. People did not accept the directive where they were asked to come to the office and work. So come back to the point here. So argument is the absenteeism might increase, the stress might increase. And imagine if I'm stressed, if I'm too much stressed, I'm asked to work, my concentration would be lesser. The cases of accidents might start increasing. So this is one concern. Second concern is, if you increase the number of working hours to let's say 12, what about women? There will be, again this is expected to happen, there will be a certain number of women who will simply say, I cannot manage taking care of the children as well as working for 12 hours. So I cannot manage both, so what I'll do is, I will quit the job. I will simply quit the job, I do not want to work. And this is a cause of concern. Why? As such, labor force participation rate of women already is a cause of concern. Although it has increased very recently, it is generally much lower compared to LFPR of men. So if this kind of an initiative is implemented by the government where number of working hours is increased and this will force the women to quit the labor market, LFPR will further decline. And that is a concern. Third one, the workers will increase the number of working hours. Instead of 48 hours, now they will work 70 hours. They will produce more, company will earn more profit. But who will take the profits? Who will earn the profit? The profits are taken away by the owners of the company. Nothing of this or nothing out of this particular profit will go to the workers, because in case of capitalism, go back to the basics of economy. In case of capitalism, the profits earned by the company goes to the owner of the company. And who is the owner of the company? The person who has started the company here will take away the profit. So there is nothing in this for the workers, everything is there for the owners. Next one, if you increase the number of working hours, as already mentioned, the work-life balance that is very, very delicate, very much required, that particular delicate balance would be disrupted. So the work-life balance will also be affected. These are some of the concerns regarding increasing the number of working hours. Now, rather than increasing the number of working hours, what is the problem in India? Is it that we are working lesser? Or is there some other problem that is hindering more production in India? Various experts argue that there is no point in increasing the number of hours. Let me prove to you. There is the argument which says that, again, according to ILO, International Labour Organization, according to a survey that was conducted by ILO, the number of working hours in India are already very high, one of the highest in the world, 47.7 hours. Right? The Indian workers on an average work for around 47.7 hours in India. If you compare that with other developed countries such as USA, Japan, Germany for that matter, the number of working hours in a week are much lower there. If you look at USA, the number of working hours per week is 36.4, again average. In Japan, 36.3. In Germany, 34.3 hours. In China, 46.1 hours. But if you look at their GDPs, if you look at the gross domestic product, many of these countries have much higher GDP compared to India. In fact, historically, if you see, India's number of working days in a year, much higher compared to other countries. Number of working hours, more than other countries, more than 2,117 hours. But if you compare that with Japan, if you compare that with Germany, theirs is much lower. But their GDP has grown at a very faster pace. That's the reason many experts argue that there is no need to increase the working hours. There is no need. Rather than increasing working hours, our focus should be on increasing productivity. Increase the workers' productivity. If you increase the workers' productivity, that will be reflecting in GDP rising up. Now you will ask me, sir, what do you mean by increasing worker productivity? For every 1 hour, what is the value of the production that you have done? Per hour, what is the value of the production that you do? That is called as workers' productivity. And looking at the data, you will be shocked. You will be realizing that the workers' productivity in India is very low. India's workers' productivity is $8.7 per hour. I'll tell you why it is low. It is $8.7 per hour. And in the global market, the average is $19 per hour. Global average is 19. In fact, if you look at this particular table, you will see that developed countries such as USA, the worker productivity is much higher. What about Japan? $39. Germany, $58. China, $13. India, $8.7. So the argument of various experts is, don't increase the number of working hours, increase workers' productivity. Now you will ask me, sir, how is that our worker productivity is very less, sir? Reason is simple. In India, usage of, let's say, skilled labor is a problem. Skilled labor availability is very low in India. So it doesn't matter how much technology you have, what kind of machine you have. If you do not have availability of skilled labor, automatically the output value will suffer. That is first one. Second one is, understand this very carefully. In India, we are focused on volume of production. That is low value volume of production. Rather than this, we should focus on high value production. That is certain goods which will have very high value in the international market. We should produce more of that. Rather than that, we are producing more quantity, no doubt, but the value of this output, value of these particular goods in the international market is lower. So I'll repeat the statement here. Remember this. One of the reason our productivity is lesser is we are focused on low value production. Our production volume is high, but the value of the production is lesser in the global market. We should address that. And the third reason why productivity is very less in India is because of investment in research and development. India's investment in research and development is very low, much less than 1%. And most of this investment in research and development comes from entities owned by Government of India. So we need to invest in research and development. More and more private sector investment should come. The number of patents, right? The number of, let's say, trademark, etc., they should be much higher in India. That will automatically lead to better technology availability for the workers, and that will increase their productivity. So rather than focusing on the number of working hours, and increasing them, we should focus on productivity and increase the productivity. Indian workers in 2021 worked 47.7 hours a week compared to Japan's 36.3, Germany's 34.3, US's 36.4, and China's 46.1. So finally, what is the way forward? What is the solution then? One, ensure that skilled labor is available. Provide skilling, right? Provide skilling so that labor which is available in the market, which is searching for the job, is a skilled labor. And with higher skilled labor, productivity would be higher. Focus more and more on high value manufacturing. Rather than low value manufacturing, focus more on high value manufacturing. Increase the investment in research and development, and provide more flexibility in terms of space, that is the place where you are allowed to work, the timing that you are allowed to work. If this kind of flexibility is provided, more and more people will be interested in working. The labor force participation rate will start increasing. So these are some of the recommendations that have been provided to increase the GDP, to take India, to move India towards a developed country status, rather than simply increasing the number of hours to 70 or more than that. So these are the 5 very important topics that I wanted to discuss with you people in the first class. Before I wind up the discussion, again reiterating the point, this Conquer Means 2024, the Quality Enrichment Program, has been designed for you people to ace the upcoming mains examination. If you want to get the details of the program, the link is provided in the description below. Please do check it out. And a very happy news for all the aspirants here. If you are an aspirant who has cleared the UPSC prelims examination, that is this year's prelims examination, and you want to enroll into this, we are offering this particular course to you at a very, very low price of 999 rupees. And regarding the PPT that I've used here, as well as the notes on the topics that I've discussed here, because many of you will tell me, sir, you did not write much in the PPT. I want to read. Where should I read? Again, reiterating the point. Go to the description box. A link will be provided to you. Click on the link. You will be able to download the PPT as well as the detailed notes of all the topics that I've discussed in the session. So that is it from my side. If you like this initiative, hit the like button. Provide your comments in the section below. Do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you. Have a great day.